Okay, so it's been a while. I have gotten a number of decks in recently and books that I really do want to talk about. I've just been so busy with work and life and all those fun things. So I figured I'd kick it up with what will hopefully be a fairly short video. I recently got this Kickstarter in that I really do like. There's a couple small points that I'll raise that I'm not super keen on, but for the most part, I'm really happy with this. This is a deck that was done by Nicholas Jacobs. He is probably most well known because he also did the Haptic Tarot, which is a deck that I don't own. I was always on the fence about getting it, but when he did this Kickstarter, this really called to me. I really was intrigued by the artwork that was shown for it. I liked his approach. I'll get it right away. This is a tarot deck that was, created with AI as its base. If you're somebody who feels that, AI has no place in tarot, then, feel free to turn off the video and, look at other decks. Because, for the most part, the issue to me is not so much what tools are used, but really the intent, and just honestly also the outcome. I think this is a deck that, while it uses AI, there definitely seems to have been a fair amount of work in post-production, and a lot of care was given to most of the cards, in my opinion. So basically, it's a deck. It's the Departures Tarot. It's a 78 card deck, but it's actually 79. There's an extra card that was during the Kickstarter, which I'll show in a little bit. But it's a deck that's inspired by the new Objectivity movement of the late 1920s, and specifically of this artist, Max Beckmann. That's where he Nick Jacobs used as a reference point for creating the AI images. It's a really interesting deck. It has an extremely painterly feel to it that I like. And this is where I think AI can be successful. When people showcase a very distinct point of view, I feel like there's a lot of decks out there that are, just somebody making some, basic images in Midjourney and calling it a day. And again, it comes back to what I said. It's very much about intent and what is put into the creation of it. I mean, there's people that are doing decks that are hand drawn or hand painted or hand drawn digital art that you can argue, okay, maybe they're putting more time and effort into it, but honestly, I feel like there's a lot of crap out there. So, I'm somebody who's fairly picky with what decks I do buy, and you could definitely argue that some of my taste is not good as well. But that's the beauty of it. There's a lot of decks out there now where we're in an amazing time of choice for what we can use in this space. I think that's really, really great. I think it also opens the door for a lot of cash grabs and unimpressive work, I'll say, to put it one way. But this deck is not that. I feel like there is some care that was put into this. I think there's an understanding of art in general. I think there is a love of modern art, especially of this movement. So let's run through a few cards. I'll get a little in depth in some other ones, but this is the card. This was the 23rd major, basically, the Arrival. It's an interesting card that comes after the World. Let's look at what it says in the guidebook for this. This is a really nice little guidebook. Definitely recommend going through it. It's got the quote that you saw previously on the bag that came with the Kickstarter. There's an introduction that talks about the deck, the inspiration, all that, and then it gets into a little thing about the generative AI usage. What's interesting in this also, he talks about the inspiration for the card design and the box design. Now, the box design, in my opinion, is nice. I do like it. I like that he moved to a two-piece box. Originally, it was a tuck box, but his inspiration is the German Institute for Standardization, which I really like. I like how simple and you got the number, the title, everything's clear. The box art that was originally in place really kind of went into this a little bit harder, in my opinion, and just overall aesthetically, I thought was better. But this is still nice. It's a really sturdy box, so I do like it. So let's the small white book here, the little white book is. It doesn't give you any imagery. It just gets you a little blurb about the card and some keywords. So, which is nice. I mean, we all have at the very least, a basic understanding of tarot. So, I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of repetition in what we buy. So it's nice that you just get to the meat of it. So let's just look at what the Arrival is. So it's the 23rd card in the majors. The keywords for it are anticipation, passage, and unknown. When you leave a phase of, pull this up so we can look at it. When you leave a phase of light behind, it raises the question: where will you arrive? Endings, departures are essential to your growth. However, the moment of arrival is just as formative. The Arrival invites you to consider your next destination and all that it holds. It marks a destination reached, the culmination of a journey. Stepping into the unknown with fresh eyes, it is a moment of both relief and apprehension. What now? Which I think is really nice. I mean, it's in some ways it's a bookend to the Fool, but it's a similar card, but in the sense like now you've run through the cycle of the majors, so you have that knowledge, and you're arriving at your destination with that knowledge in hand, which is it's nice. I think that's a really nice card to have there. I'm curious to see. I haven't really done any readings with this, so I'm curious to see how this will play out in a normal reading. One of the things I like about this deck is that there's a lot of directionality in the cards, in the imagery that's used. There's a lot of movement that's implied, and there's just some really nice ideas displayed in the artwork of the cards. So let's just look at a few more. I will say one thing. One of the cons that I have about this deck is, while I love the simplicity of the backs, I really wish it was a little bit. I wish the design, the symbol that's here, was stood out a little bit more. I feel like with the printing, this color, which I think is a gorgeous color, just is too close to the black. So for me, it's a little too. Could use a little bit more contrast, but that is a real nitpicky thing, in my opinion. But it's good card stock. It's it's a little thin, but it feels sturdy as well. I don't know the specifics if it says what it is. I think it was upgraded. It does have a linen finish on it. I don't know if that's coming through, but it's really nice. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the cards have a really interesting take to them. It's obviously based off of the RWS. A lot of that imagery comes through. There's some cards which I'll call out specifically that I felt have a slightly different take, but I again, I don't necessarily mind that because I like some variety in the deck. So so that when I pull out a certain deck to use, there's usually reasons. Yeah. So right now we're just getting some majors out, I guess. Yeah. Here's a King Cups. I mean, it's just really beautiful work. I mean, it feels extremely painterly. It feels like a drawing. I mean, I think there's definitely parts of it that you look at and you're like, oh, okay, that's AI. But I feel like there's enough there. Here's the Fool card. Again, the interesting take on the Fool. It doesn't have the same necessary feel as the standard RWS. The symbols but I feel like there's a solemnness to this that I feel runs through the whole deck, and that I think it's gonna taint readings to that feeling, for better or worse. And I just think it's something that people need to probably be aware of. But I do really like the deck. I really like the artwork of it. I will say I do feel like where the deck fails a little bit, at least in the suits, is in the coins suit. I feel like that's the one that comes across to me the most AI feeling. There's just elements that I feel like are consistently shown, but like they don't have a lot of. I'm not saying that they should be the same across the suit. I do think you need that variety, because like something like the blades, the swords are different. They're not the same sword type across the whole suit. But I feel like there's a consistency there. And I think with the coins, it feels like it's just something about it just doesn't come across right for me. Let me see if I can find it. Here's a Knight of Coins. Like you can see the coin. The coin is they're very different across from it. So I feel. Again, I'm probably being just extremely nitpicky with it. I do really like the deck. It's just, that was like the only thing that kind of called out to me. I'm not going to go through the whole deck. I just want to show a few. But there's some really, really nice cards here. So let me grab a few specific cards. So I'm always somebody I immediately always want to see the Moon card. I always want to see the Death card and High Priestess. These are always important cards to me in a deck. And I do really like to look at like the Hangman and Justice, because I think these are cards that they can easily screw up. Now, I really like these cards. I would say for me, the one that falls the flattest is probably the High Priestess card in this. Again, it's one of those cards, it's like all the elements are there, but there's a solemnness. I don't know if that should be there. I think it's losing a little bit of the true meaning of the card. That's not coming across, to say it one way. I think these other cards are extremely successful, though. I love that moon card. It's just such a nice card. The artwork is really, really nice. Again, it's got some changes from the original. There's elements of it are not there from your standard RWS. And knowing that this deck is based on the RWS, that's an interesting choice. Obviously, there's no crayfish and the towers and the path and all that are gone. It loses a little bit of that. I feel like there's the element of the animalism and is abstracted here somewhat. But I do think this is a beautiful card, and I think it'll be really interesting to read with. I do think so, and I really love the Justice card in this. The Hangman is also it's a nice card. I feel like it doesn't play up. It doesn't play into the more modern take of the Hangman that I feel like a lot of readers and creators go with, but I do, I think this plays kind of in that it can go either way, in my opinion. It has kind of leans into a little bit of like kind of what's the TDM feel versus the inspiration of the RWS. I think there's some meat here that would be really interesting in a reading. So let's pull up some other cards to look at. Another card that I'm always interested in seeing is the Two of Swords. It's the Hermit. I'm always curious to see how the Eight of Swords is done in the deck. Page of Cups. And let's just look at one of the aces. I really like the Eight of Swords. I think this is well done. It comes across the way that I want an Eight of Swords to come across. I feel like the Ace of Coins is really nice. I think it's an interesting take on it. Yeah, I actually really like it. The more I look at it, the more I like it. It's a really, really strong ace. Page of Cups, I think, is also really great. You have the element of the fish. You got the cup. It's just, it's outside the cup, which I like. But otherwise, it feels like a very traditional Page of Cups in my mind. The Hermit, I think, is really good. I think there's some really interesting elements in this that will allow a reader to pull some key elements, especially depending on what cards it's around. I think there's some really interesting elements, like with the lantern, the style of the lantern. I think it almost looks like there's the figure within the lantern, which I think is key. I think that's nice. I think the Two of Swords is be something I have to see how it reads for me over time. I think it doesn't read the same way for me. I mean, I think obviously the elements are there, but there's some extraneous pieces here that, like this shadow arm coming across, that almost gives me the feel of like less that you're making that you have a decision to make, but more that it's external forces are playing into it, which is a interesting take on that. Let me see what they say in the book. I'm curious how he breaks this down. Okay, so Two of Blades. Decision, clarity, acuity. The best decisions come from a place of clarity, yet too much external noise can cloud your judgment. While seeking different perspectives can be valuable, sometimes the best course is to block out distractions and listen to your own mind. If discord appears in a reading, it signals a time to trust in your intuition and analytical skills, and resist the urge to let others unduly influence your choices. See, now, what's interesting to me is I initially read this as something, an external force that is unduly influencing your choices. But I guess you could also take this and read this as listening to your own mind and trusting your intuition. That maybe this is, you're blindfolded, you're at the ready, you're at rest, but you're at the ready. And this is your intuition doing the work, the spark, the knowing, the wisdom's there. I guess, yeah. I mean, it's just a deck that I think I just need to spend some time with more and actually use in real readings. But I really, that's interesting, because that was one of the things that I initially pulled out as a problematic card for me. But I'm looking at it in a new light now that I'm saying these things out loud, which is interesting. I mean, honestly, it's one of the few AI decks that I have. I'm not usually a huge fan of purchasing AI decks. It's not so much about the use of AI, but I think there's a lot of people using AI badly. I think there's AI's ability is growing exponentially, but the ability for people to have some judgment when they're using it isn't. It's not keeping up. So I think we're at an interesting time. I get why people are upset about it, and I understand why some people don't want anything to do with it. But ultimately, I do think, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We need to understand how to work with it and how to embrace it the best we can, and to make it work for us and not make us work for it. So, it's a conversation that I think people need to have. I don't want to say that anybody's necessarily right or wrong on either end of it. Nick Jacobs has made 2 decks using AI that I think are 2 quite beautiful decks. I do have some regret not picking up the haptic when I had the chance to, but ultimately I knew it was... I wouldn't use it. I knew I wouldn't use it, but it's one of those things that I wish was in the collection. But ultimately, I don't know how long this deck's going to be available. If it's available for purchase now, I will put a link in the description below. I'm assuming at the very least he's got some extras from the Kickstarter. I think it's a good deck. I really do. I got to use it more. So, stay tuned. Maybe I'll do another video at another point on it. I'm not sure. It must be somewhat of a good deck. It got me I haven't done a video in months, and this kind of got me inspired to do one. So I definitely recommend for people to check it out. We need more people making interesting choices in tarot. Thanks, and I'll talk to you soon.